Hi, you're watching India Post Live, India's first web TV online conversation. I'm Shivraj and we're talking about NRIs and their votes and why they're not really counted. You can join the conversation by logging onto our website and posting comments at indiapostlive.com, and you can also tweet with us. Our handle is hashtag IndiaPostLive. So joining us in studio is former journalist Balachandra Nambiar. Bala, the whole argument that NRIs form such a large population on the outside, feeding the Indian economy, why is it that the government hasn't really caught up with them in terms of giving them the rights that they've been demanding so far?
Well, to begin with, I need to disambiguate the term called NRI because in general definitive meaning, NRI, the non-resident Indian, is just any Indian. He could be a rich billionaire techie from the Silicon Valley. It could be a rich doctor in the United States. It could be a mere carpenter in the Gulf, the so-called Malabari. So basically what we're talking about is the NRI in general, but with particular reference to the poor NRIs in the Gulf. I mean, I would like to touch upon him because he's the one who is actually the
most disenfranchised,
and who could have been used as a real political vote bank if political class showed enough sagacity and political wisdom. And now why they haven't done it so far, surprisingly, is because, to my mind, it appears that they've not been able to create, I'm talking about the political class, the real political constituency.
Absolutely.
Out of this vote bank, out of this potential vote bank.
Absolutely.
The reason being that I just mentioned this, the other variety, the rich variety from the United States and Silicon Valley, they are not interested in your vote. They're not interested. They don't want to quote you as a political class. And the political class, in turn, doesn't want to quote you because, in any case, they only need your money. And the money is getting in any case.
Okay, so in fact, we have a story that very succinctly talks about the fact that it's not about money, but they also want to be counted in. Let's take a look at the report.
All NRIs Vote Now screams a website seeking voting rights for absentee non-resident Indians. As of now, only NRIs who are physically present in their constituencies have the right to vote. As of May 2012, according to the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, there are over 10 million NRIs. They now demand online voting or postal ballots. A writ petition seeking voting rights for absentee NRIs has been filed in the Supreme Court by Dr. Shamsil Walayil Parampatta, Managing Director of an Abu Dhabi-based health firm.
I do support voting rights for NRIs, right? So while we stay out of the country, we still are Indians. I think this basic fact should be enough for us to have the right to cast our vote. In addition, like others, the NRIs play an important role in the growth of the economy. And I think that should also help bolster our case. So I do support this initiative. I think there could be a debate on how NRIs can cast their vote, but they should be given this right.
The upper and lower houses of India's parliament had passed the Representation of the People Amendment Bill in 2010, allowing Indian citizens to vote even if he or she lived outside the country for more than 6 months. But absentee voting?
No, first of all, people must understand, those who are asking the vote box in every village in abroad, that there is no voting right for the persons who are not in India. Especially there is a 6 months period. When Vailar Ravi, his vote will be deleted from Ernakulam constituency if I am not there for more than 6 months. So amended the law and made because of my ministry's effort, it had been law being amended, made enroll the name of the NRIs for the family when their village, their name will be enrolled. When they can vote only when they are here. The voting is not a small thing which you can do everywhere and every place. It's not possible.
All said and done, the enthusiasm to vote is so high that NRIs are flying into their constituencies in huge numbers to cast their votes. A Dubai-based Indian organization, Kerala Muslim Cultural Center, which has 50,300 members in the UAE, would be flying down Malayalis to Calicut, the seaport city of North Kerala, on April 7th. But for now, only those who make the big money can fly down to exercise their rights. Looks like it's going to be a long wait for absentee NRIs.
So the question that we're really asking is, you want our money, but why not our ballot? So it's only the rich NRIs who can fly in can really cast their votes. Of course, you can join in on our conversation by tweeting with us, hashtag India Post Live, and I will keep reading out those and posing those questions to our guests. We're joined, in fact, via Skype from Thiruvananthapuram by Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan. Ambassador Srinivasan, thank you very much for joining in on the conversation on India Post Live. From a policy perspective, there is a sense that the Indian government, while it might have announced in 2010 that they were giving NRIs the capacity to vote, that they still haven't caught up with the rest of the world, where absentee ballots have become pretty much par for the course. Why is that? Is it a channel infrastructurally, or is it just a challenge overall politically?
Well, this is not a new city. We talk about NRIs, we only talk about Indian passport holders.
Right.
Always have the ability to vote if they came back and voted and if their names were on the list. So what we have done, what the government has done, is nothing dramatic or exceptional. It would have been exceptional if we had allowed persons of Indian origin who were citizens of other countries were allowed to vote. Such a demand was also there from the United States, where I served for 10 years. They always used to ask, we would like to vote in the Indian elections. And that will be contradictory to our constitutional provisions, because you cannot be loyal to more than one government and one state. So we are only talking about Indian passport holders. They are entitled to vote in Indian elections all the time. There was never anything new about this. But the practicality we have to look at, because unlike the presidential election in the US, here the elections are to individual constituencies. If the NRIs were allowed to say vote from the Gulf countries, in the embassy we'll have to put how many boxes, how many MPs will be represented there. We have to find out which are the constituencies, and you have separate electronic machines for each one of them. This is not practical. And therefore, the practical suggestion made by the government is that they are on the voters list and they come and vote. So here there is no issue of money, there is no issue of government catching up, etc., etc. It is a simple matter that Indian citizens have the right to vote, and they are exercising it in a practical manner.
So Ambassador Srinivasan, from an embassy perspective on ground, how much is done to educate and facilitate this for NRIs? Because we were just having a discussion about those who cannot afford to fly back, for those who are perhaps not that educated. Because we just got a tweet from a young NRI who says, "How about young NRIs like me who don't know much about our own rights and the ability to actually cast a ballot?"
No, it is not a denial of rights. It's only a matter of feasibility.
Sure.
How would you vote for, say, if I am a Trivandrum candidate and I need to have a box or a machine for Trivandrum with all the 20 candidates shown there, and I may be the only one living in Abu Dhabi, and I'll need this machine just for myself? Is that practical?
Absolutely. There is also a writ petition. There's also a writ petition in the court, in fact, asking for the absentee ballot. So from what you tell us, that it is actually an infrastructure nightmare. How do you foresee this playing out?
Well, those who are interested and willing, because it's not today that we know that these elections will be held, and plan their holidays in such a way that they don't need to spend money on coming and voting. I do not expect anybody to spend money and come and vote and go back. It has to be linked with something else which you do. They all keep coming. I mean, I agree that workers, etc., are not able to come, as frequently as businessmen could do. But the point I am trying to make is that since we are not involving the persons of Indian origin or those who are already accepted other nationalities, this is not a matter of any importance, and the numbers are not very large either. And therefore, the only other alternative is postal votes. But postal votes apparently are not practical because the registering all these people abroad and then making sure that these postal ballots go to the right people and is sent back by the right people was not found acceptable to the Election Commission. So that is why that was abandoned.
All
So
right.
this is a limited thing. This is the first time that this is happening. And after this, as we evolve, we may find new ways and means of letting them vote. But the important thing for them was the fact that it was recognized that they have a right to vote in India.
All right. So, Bala, your reactions to what Ambassador Srinivasan just said, because you were bringing up a very moot point. You were saying NRIs could span the rich NRIs who've gone to Silicon Valley, but there are also those, the workers who are disenfranchised at many levels in the countries where they're working, as well as their own country, if they're not given some sort of channel to understand that they do have a means to come and vote.
Well, I can't agree more with the ambassador when he talks about the logistical problems of
Sure.
having to put X many ballot papers in X many embassies for X many candidates, etc., etc. But then he himself corrected. I mean, rather he willingly, by implication, he found a solution to it. The postal ballots. Now, there again, his problem is one of logistics. Now, if you sit on this big problem called logistics or practicality of implementing a law, I mean, we would still have been on the trees. The basic problem is we have to find a solution. If there's a problem, you would find a solution. I'm sure there could be any number of technical innovations by which a soldier in Siachen, if he can vote, the 1.25 million soldiers that this country has. Now, if they can vote through postal ballots, why can't another few 100,000 NRIs vote by the same method? Now, here you raise the red flag of technicality or impracticality or logistics. I mean, I don't understand that. Okay. I mean, that's just shirking one's responsibility.
Okay, so Ambassador Srinivasan, actually, an interesting tweet's also come our way from an NRI saying, online voting, shouldn't this be considered with checks in place? Do you think that would be a practical solution? Because Bala was saying, I think it's about time we now look at solutions rather than, talk about the obvious logistical problems. Would online voting be something that would be feasible?
Well, that's something which has to be approved by the Election Commission. I recall sitting in Washington recommending that we give postal votes to all the Indian citizens. And then I was told that this was not accepted by the Election Commission. So when it is a solution, and this is not only for soldiers, also foreign service officers. We are entitled to vote, ballot vote. If you look at every voters list in every constituency in the world, you will find a last category foreign service, maybe one person, maybe two people. And my name was always there in that particular constituency for years. So every time I got a postal ballot and I voted for it. To make that foolproof was the problem of the Election Commission. It was not the problem of the government or the embassy. So the Election Commission felt that this was not practical at this point in time. That's all. If there can be a foolproof arrangement of online voting, I see no reason why we should not accept it. It should be very good. It will enable everyone to want to participate. But it has to be foolproof. Technologically, it has to be made feasible, and it's something that people should work on. I agree with you.
So, going back to Silicon Valley.
Let me interrupt here. I want to ask the ambassador, I mean, as somebody who's responsible and who has a certain hotline with the government, I think he's in a responsible position with the government. Why doesn't it start with him? What is he doing? What has he done so far? As a former ambassador, former diplomat, and someone who has a kind of a say in the running of the government, the Kerala government, I mean. So why don't you start, sir, somewhere?
No, I have no such responsibility at this point. I was referring to the time when I was in the foreign service. Now I work with the government only on educational aspects, not on any other. But anyway, what I'm saying is that this is a proposal which was made by us from abroad when this was discussed. And for some reason it was not accepted. But I agree that as as our technology develops, we should be able to introduce it. And I think discussions like this will bring it to the attention of the Election Commission and the governments. And of course, the NRIs themselves who are constantly asking for it.
But
so
ironically, Ambassador, a lot of large major IT players innovate using India as their back office R&D development centers and are actually providing solutions, big solutions to governments all over the place. Why doesn't the Indian government engage? Because they already are at the back end with Aadhaar and the passports. Why don't they look at a solution like that? Or are you saying that there isn't enough of a push?
No, they should. I don't know, because when this was introduced that they could come and vote, there was a general feeling that this is the best they could do at this point in time. So, into the next level, like the card that became most card.
All right, I think we seem to have a problem with that link with Ambassador Srinivasan, the hazards of technology, but I think that's a pretty moot point. The fact that most of the major IT companies are coming to India and setting up back office R&D because the Indian IT industry is feeding the rest of the world. Why can't we do the same for the Indian government? Because there are a lot of contracts with the Indian government in terms of infrastructure. What's really preventing the Indian government from taking that IT back end to the election commission and doing something about it?
Well, it's like asking what's the government of India doing about XYZ problem? But the government of India has not been doing a lot of things about a lot of things. So this could be one of the things. I mean, lack of initiative, lack of drive, and probably one political reason, as I can see, is that, the NRIs, especially the ones in the Gulf, I'm referring to. I want to go back to them, time and again, because they are the biggest vote bank the political class could have used, and they're not using it for some strange reason. And until they get that of course, they've already taken a rain check every time there's the NRI conference hosted in Delhi by the government of India, the Prime Minister or whoever is the VIP, the NRI minister. He goes on record promising the moon, promising the citizenship and all kinds of things. That's a kind of a rain check they're taking on the future vote bank.
But there are also apparently chartered flights now flying in these Malayalis from the Gulf.
No,
is that enough, or is that again another political move?
No, I mean, that will be too far-fetched, I think.
But it is happening. Some organizations are doing that. But would you say that that's perhaps politically motivated rather than from a larger perspective of counting in all the NRIs?
Well, talking about politics, I have a lot to say on that count because, I lived in the Gulf for about 10 years, and a couple of interactions I've had with the so-called quasi-amateur politicians, NRIs, is that the political class, the politicians of the government in India, in general, and in Kerala in particular, they're conscious of the consequences of creating a vote bank which may work to their disadvantage. Like if it's, for instance, if Modi becomes the Prime Minister tomorrow, he would certainly be very happy to grant the voting status or voting privilege to all the NRIs in the United States because most of them are pro-BJP. And that kind of confidence is lacking in the other governments, the state governments and even the present central government, because they're not sure which way the wind would blow, which way the vote bank would work, which way would who would it benefit?
Actually benefit. So just one last question to Ambassador Srinivasan, because I know that you have to go somewhere. But, the government at the time had made a big move with the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, which this government then made less frequent. There was a move to try and get the NRIs and the PIOs counted in. There are reports of flights coming in from the Gulf with droves of NRIs. Is that a feasible thing to do? Or as like Bala was saying, it's just a political thing?
No, I do not think that anybody is organizing it from a political perspective. I haven't heard of any party doing that. I don't think the investment may be too much and the cost may be too expensive. Certainly, I know that a large number of people have coincided their visits to Kerala on this time. So there are lots of people who are coming in. The flights are full, which they're coming from the Gulf. So it's quite possible that many of them may have adjusted their timing to be here on the 10th of April to be able to cast a vote. But how many numbers it will be, whether it's organized by any political parties, etc., we don't yet know. But this will be an interesting thing to watch after this election and then try and see whether this can be made more, made easier for them to come. Vote in some form, either online or by poll or by arrival. So this was only first step, and I'm sure further steps will be taken as we go along.
Ambassador Srinivasan, thank you very much for joining us from Thiruvananthapuram. Bala, we've got an interesting tweet that's coming in, since you've been an NRI at some level as well. It says, when it comes to Indian politics, NRIs have the loudest opinions, such patriots, smirks. I think you were alluding to it in the answer before, where you said that, in fact, the biggest vote bank now are those who are pro-BJP sitting in the United States who have the loudest opinion.
No, that's only in the United States. I'm not
But
talking about.
are you fearful that that's the perception of NRIs out here at
That's
home?
a
And that's
basic
where?
perception. If I have to put my finger on the reason why it's not happening is because of the political implications that might cause in the event of creating a vote bank in the NRI segment. This is I'm not when I said Modi, I mean I'm not just talking about the NRI. I mean I'm not talking about the entire NRI spectrum. I'm talking about the NRIs in the United States, who mostly Gujaratis, mostly Marathis,
Absolutely.
mostly rich patriots. But there's another segment in the Gulf, which is the so-called Malabari, which is the working class voter, who is politically conscious though, but still he doesn't have a voice.
No, he doesn't have the means to actually exercise.
Or the
his
means
conscience.
to exercise or amplify his voice. So that's the biggest tragedy. One of the funniest thing about the whole thing is, I've seen lots of politicians, they make pilgrimage to these countries, Gulf countries, every year on a regular basis, 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, once a year, and they come back with lots of booties. They openly ask for booties, gifts, both in cash and in kind. Now that kind of an exploitation, nobody has highlighted it.
Absolutely.
You know,
So they take their money, but they're not giving them
Exactly.
the education and the means to actually be
or
able to exercise.
they're not
their
letting
vote.
them exercise the privilege.
Absolutely.
And the ballot is one of the most important privilege.
In fact, there was another tweet, and this is something you brought up right in the beginning, where if soldiers in Siachen are entitled to vote, then why not NRIs? This is Vikas Huda, who's retweeted a vote by Vararuchi, who said exactly that. If soldiers can do it, why not a few thousand extra, or at least the infrastructure in place to enable all the others who are not, part of this official
Absolutely.
channel?
Go ahead. I give my right hand to anybody who does that.
So there's again another critical tweet that says, you can't promise anything to citizens. What you're talking about, NRIs, waste of time. They're not even staying in the country. This is obviously a very extreme view. What do you say to
That's
someone
a
who
very
says that?
uncharitable view, of course. He doesn't probably know what NRI means. The difference between NRI and RI is just one N.
Right.
Just because he's physically removed from the country of
Because of
origin,
professional
absolutely,
reasons.
for whatever reasons, professional, whatever reason. You're denying him his right, fundamental right. How would this gentleman feel if he were in the other position, if the boot were on the other leg?
So, you've lived in the Gulf. I think for a lot of people, the perception isn't really clear. When you talk about the working class NRIs, they actually don't have much rights either in the countries that they're operating in. And I don't know if the embassies provide them even the kind of fallback.
It's a sad story, actually. Somebody can write volumes and volumes about the kind of the kind of torture, the kind of indignities they go through, as all because they don't have a voice. The embassies are not there to support them or back them or even to listen to them. So it's basically, the reason being, as I said, it's all because they are not a political class. They don't have a constituency to even blackmail the political class back home. So it's a cry in the wilderness. So until they get that vote, the ultimate weapon, the Excalibur, so to speak, their voices would remain a cry in the wilderness.
And it's ironical because when we were talking before the show, you said that there are states like Kerala which are really money order states. They thrive.
Yes.
4% of India's GDP is coming from the
Absolutely.
NRIs.
One point, there was a time when, of course, the whole economy was called, it was actually Prabhat Patnaik who called it money order economy. But then it's 1.5 billion at some point in time was the kind of inflow of the NRI money. And the government of India, I don't think they used it sensibly. I don't think anything to explain for all that money that came in. Either they just set up a NOCA kind of thing in 1996, and then they set up a ministry in 2006 for the NRIs. But what has come out of it?
In fact, the overseas ministry has actually scaled back a lot of the engagement that they have with NRIs. From the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas that became a big show of comparison.
It's a commercial thing, actually.
Right.
You know the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, there's one organized by the government, there's another one organized by the private parties, just to give some award to a billionaire businessman, an NRI businessman, and get loads of money in return. Somebody, I don't want to take names, but somebody in the Gulf, a billionaire, he has been awarded God knows how many times by how many NRI, the Pravasi Bharatiya organizations, the private ones, and apart from the government. So it's all basically an exploitative game.
And when you talk about NRIs, so let's even from personal experience, having talked to a lot of rich NRIs who turn to the embassies for education and a little bit more facilitation for the process. They say that there's a lot of obfuscation in terms of what they can and cannot do, or what rights they have, they don't have, in terms of just clear literature and guidance as well as to the rights they have to come back and vote.
It's only expected. Only natural to be expected, because that's the kind of education they had. It's the kind of support they get from the local embassies and from the government back home.
So, as an NRI, when you were in the Gulf, how many times did you actually feel that you got a chance to actually come back and vote? Did you come back and vote?
I voted once, but it so happened per chance that I was on my vacation, and I'm ashamed to admit that I couldn't make it the second time. For whatever reasons, but then how many NRIs can afford it?
Absolutely, and few last words really on the issue of the election commission holding out, because I think there is a legal petition that's been filed in the Supreme Court demanding that the election commission, because if the election commission can bring in technologies like linking the ballot and providing all these new tools where they're giving out boxes of mithai, asking local voters to come on voting day, what is stopping them from actually going out there and maybe going that extra mile to create some sort of initiative to draw in the NRI votes through other means?
Simple. Lack of imagination. Lack of imagination. They need a good marketing person to do that, to tell them that.
So I think we've actually had quite a few tweets that one can't read out because they're all slamming the EC and government. But I think what's telling is that this election, is going to be a rather rhetorical, bitter election. And I think the NRIs are feeling a little on the outside and left out. And they're feeling a little left out and on the outside.
All the excitement happening back home and they're not part of it.
In fact, so let's just tap into that. We have Akhil Verma joining us via Skype from Singapore. Akhil, go ahead, ask a question, or give us a sense as an NRI what you feel sitting in a country that's not very far from India.
Well, as an NRI, see, I came here to study, because I knew that there are some advantages in this country. So, these are the small things that I had to, give up when leaving the country. So, I don't think that, we should consider this as a huge problem. And not only that, I accept with what Vaila Ravi had just said, that, even if you're just in India, if you're not in your own constituency, you don't have your right to vote. So, what's the difference if you're not in India? Isn't it the same thing? And one more thing I'd like to say, if there's a chance, if this does happen that we have a chance to vote abroad, I just think that it's going to increase the problems and the chances of cheating, as you say, of getting wrong votes in the wrong hands and things like that. So I think I don't think it's a bad thing of us not having a chance to vote. These are small things that you have to give up when you leave a country, I guess. I'm sorry if I'm wrong somewhere.
No, you're not wrong. Thank you very much. So clearly, that's a contrarian view there, Bala.
Yeah, I know. You see, one point is, I wanted to improve upon that point. When we have hundreds of thousands of people in India, residents, who don't give a damn about voting.
What are we going on about with NRIs?
Exactly. Precisely the point, especially the middle class.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us there from Singapore. I think it's very heartening to see that you also logged in. I believe we also have another caller. So clearly the momentum is picking up. NRIs want to dial in and have their say as well.
Yes.
But that was an interesting perspective. I think the concern that given the complexity of organizing an election like this over 9 phases, there could be a few slips in between if they expanded it beyond their ability.
No, that's only to be expected. But then the most important thing is, this is the most important weapon you have as a citizen of a democracy. Your vote is your weapon. Your vote is, as I said, the ultimate instrument by which you can effect or impact or introduce changes in your society. Now, if that's denied to you, that renders you impotent. in a way.
But I think the logistical question is a very moot point. I know you said that the government lacks imagination. The Election Commission needs to push it a little bit more. But like the ambassador said, it is a logistical nightmare as well, organizing it.
Well, it's a logistical nightmare, it's a logistical problem, it's a practical difficulty. But how long can you go on with that excuse?
So we do actually have someone, on Skype from Dubai. Kabir, you've been sort of watching and listening into the discussion. What's your perspective on the issue of NRIs being given the right to vote?
You can't hear.
Okay, we seem to obviously have a problem linking up with Kabir in Dubai. I guess the hazards of technology trying to connect. But thank you very much, Bala, for joining in the conversation, because I think both your perspective as a commentator and as an NRI in the past sort of gives perspective to the issue. So keep logging in and posting your comments at indiapostlive.com. You can also continue on Twitter with hashtag IndiaPostLive. Thank you so much for joining the conversation, and keep watching.